So if you look at the world around you, design and technology are everywhere, from the apps we rely on to order food to the tools we use every day to help stay connected to seamless checkout experiences we now take for granted. Today's guest, Krista, is at the heart of this intersection. As a technical program manager at Google Play, Krista draws from a rich background in front end development, product management, and Scrum to shape the digital experiences that we use every single day. She's also the founder of CX with Kris, helping professionals break into technical program management. With degrees in computer science and digital media from Georgia Tech, she's here to share how design and technology can help you build a career in tech.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you also for the introduction.
Yeah,
It's
well,
never
welcome to the show. I forgot to say that.
no, no, no. Thank you for having me. With that, it sounds like I've done like so much. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of like to kick things off, your journey from front end to technical program management at Google is interesting. What actually motivated you to make that transition?
That's a great question. And I wish I had a romanticized answer. But honestly, a recruiter reached out to me from Google and said, like, do you want to be a technical program manager? And it was Google. And I interviewed for Google as like an undergrad. It was horrible. And so I think like different mindset, different like motivation of like, I need to work for Google. They could have offered me anything. And I would have been like, yeah, I'll interview for it. So at first it was just me getting into Google. And then as I like learned more about the role, and I like kind of sat with it around like, as you mentioned in the beginning, like being in the intersection of all these different teams and not even realizing at the time how many different teams I would work with. I thought it was a great way to kind of, if not flex, then learn about these different areas that like are involved with launching consumer goods, especially for a big company like Google. So it felt like a great opportunity.
And so, what did you find that there was some maybe potential like experience gaps or like knowledge gaps that you had to bridge? And I asked that because like that's always something that a lot of people either breaking into tech brand new or like transitioning into new roles tend to face.
Oh, yes, definitely. So, at the time, I didn't know that I would be with Google Play, but I knew that I would be like when I looked at the job description, it was clear that I would be building products for like helping to build products for a lot of users. I had never been on a project that like had marketing and legal, like I guess I would be interacting with them as much as I do now. So I felt like there was a bridge in my skills in terms of understanding how do these teams fit into like the overall software development lifecycle. Because prior to that, either on the technical side or on the Scrum Master side or product owner side, the different companies that I worked with, it was a standard software development lifecycle, but I was never involved in the conversations around, like I said, legal marketing. And then also, I think it was very clear before I joined Google that they were very data heavy and that data was at the
Mm.
heart of a lot of decisions in terms of experiments and what should be worked on. And so I also felt like there was a gap in, I guess, having a good understanding of how do you leverage data to make a decision. And so I think understanding that world and all these different pieces, I thought like uh, maybe I can't do it, but I was so motivated to pass that interview. I was like, I don't care. I will act like I can.
So you touch on something that I think is very, very critical, which is like interviewing, right? I almost feel like, it's one part about tech that people don't talk about as much as, it deserves attention. And it's because oftentimes, like, there's so many steps that you have to, go through. Is one, getting the skills, applying, having a good enough resume that people actually want to have a conversation. But being the person who can have that conversation and convince someone, to say, we want to make you an offer is such a big deal. What were some of the steps that you took in your interview process, and how did that, what did you learn, and were there other experiences that helped you prepare for that moment?
That's a great question. So I definitely I remember scouring like job like forums to understand like, okay, what is the Google interview process? And luckily the resumes, the recruiters also gave guidance around like, hey, watch these videos that we have like on YouTube around program management. Here's the job posting. Make sure you look at that in detail. I think for me, I realized that I don't do well with surprise interview questions, meaning I think my biggest fear was them throwing a curveball and me not having a story to either tell them or have a hypothetical to show them. And so I remember when I was interviewing for this position, I don't know what I read, but they said if someone asks you a question and you don't have a story that directly impacts it, or you feel like you don't have a good one way is instead of not answering, which I feel like I had done in interviews prior, but giving a, well, I don't have a story around this, but if I did, here's how I would approach it. Another thing that I tried to do is make sure that I had like two or three stories that went along with an answer, like, sorry, went along with a question. I think that helped me kind of have some diversity in like my experiences. So if it was like cross-functional collaboration, stakeholder management, I made sure that I had some things to draw from. Because I think one thing I thought about is how many ways can they answer these questions, like ask these questions? Like if at the heart of it, they're trying to understand, have you dealt with stakeholders that don't align? What are the different ways they can ask this? And then what are the stories that I have in place? So I'd say that helped me tremendously because kind of helped me anticipate like what questions could be asked. Also looking for keywords so I understand like what type of story I should like grab from. Um, and then I think from the technical side, I think I was fortunate that there's a lot of information around how Google does technical interviews, like what they're looking for from people that previously worked there. And so one thing that popped up was system design and make sure you understand system design. So I wanted to go the extra mile and I like um, paid for like person that was a software engineer at Google previously, but had a company where they just had system design questions for engineers. I had a feeling they weren't going to ask me in-depth details like engineers, but I thought, okay, I need to understand system design in and out. I also did that as a way to kind of take it to a level 10 in case they bring it at a level 8. It's like, okay, I can still manage my way through it. But I've said a lot. I think summarizing, making sure I had different stories that touched on the different themes that I would see within the job posting, that I saw within the Google videos in terms of this is what we look for in technical program managers. And then also seeing different ways that they can get at the same theme. So whether that be, like I said, cross-functional collaboration, complex projects, risk management, things like
So I definitely understand everything that you're saying, but I even want to take it, maybe like break it down a little bit more, because for someone who's not been in tech, I could be wondering, like, what do you mean stories? Like, what does that mean? So for like for someone who's not encountered that before in an interview, what are stories and why is it important to have one? And why is it like a standard across the industry?
yeah, that's a really good question. So I remember somebody asked, and I'm going to tie it back to how it ties into like technical program management. I remember someone recently asked me, "Hey, I want to be an engineer. How do I like? What's the best way for me to stand out?" And so I spoke to some of the engineers on my team, and one had a really good answer. At the end of the day, hiring managers, you're showing them you can do the job. And so, in showing them that you can do the job, you need to demonstrate your knowledge. And so, there are a few ways you can demonstrate your knowledge. One way is through education, like I have this degree, kind of solidifies, okay, you know what you're talking about. Another way for engineering is like a portfolio, where you've done a set of projects that showcase that you can do easy, medium, hard technical challenges. The best way is experience. That's another way you've demonstrated I've applied this skill set in different arenas and then I had these outcomes. For me, stories are important because they, I think, are the fact. I don't want to say factual, but I think a high caliber or weigh the most when it comes to you demonstrating I can do this job. And even if you haven't done it in the exact environment, exact domain, depending on how you craft the story, what you highlight, what skills, what you did, it's a great way to just showcase and demonstrate I can do this job. Um, and so that's why I think stories are important as a way to provide evidence that you've had in your past around what you've done, and then provide some foresight for the recruiter hiring manager around like what you can do.
Hmm. Yeah, and I want to stay on this topic maybe just for one or two more questions. So, um, if we think about like coming up with these stories or even answering interview questions, right? Is there like I hear people talk about star format or car or all this other like different, types of formats. Why is it important to be able to kind of like use those as a vehicle to deliver the stories?
Oh yeah, that's really good. That's a good question as well. Um, I think that those type of frameworks, formats are important because they help provide structure. So I think with any story, there's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. And with a story, sometimes the end is supposed to make you feel good. Like there's a goal when it comes to the end of a story. When it comes to interviewing, the end of the story should be giving what you've done. So, what's your impact? And also giving confidence to whoever's on the other side that you can do the job. And so, I think with experiences that we have through our workplace, there's so many details who you worked with, maybe the nuances that you wouldn't understand unless you were there. And so you need a way to like compact that and put it in a sandwich where it's organized and people can clearly understand okay, there was the beginning, which is probably the context, the middle in terms of what you did, and then the end in terms of what your impact was, what the outcome was. And I think those frameworks help you organize your story in that way. I think some people like some folks can't follow that framework, like the way their mind works, like they organize things in a different way. And I say, I think that's fine. At the end of the day, whatever question they ask, understand what they're asking, why they're asking it. And then with the evidence that you're going to provide them, you need to make it organized and concise. Because also, especially as a program manager, one of your roles is a big part of your role, and I know the same in product management, is communication and being able to be straight to the point, provide the details that are needed for the person on the other end. And I feel that these frameworks allow you to practice that and showcase that.
Thank you so much, Chris. I feel like you've done like a lot of justice to the question. Welcome to everyone who's joining the stream. Hey, Emily, welcome to the stream. This is Working in Tech. Every week, we bring on tech professionals across the industry to share their experience, to share their journey. And today we have Kris, who's a technical program manager at Google, and she's sharing a lot of gems already. We're going to be here for like the next couple, 40 minutes. You're going to have opportunities to ask her questions about a journey, whatever else that you think might be impactful to you. So again, welcome. And one of the things that, the reason why I asked this is like I was actually interviewing recently, right? And I see, the difference in style in different candidates and how they answer questions. And I think you nailed it perfectly. One of the reasons why, for me, just to add on to what you said, why stories are important, again, and I think you touched on it, is that that person who's asking you doesn't have the context of what you did. And even the details that you choose to live in or keep out can impact how good or how bad your story comes off as. Because, for example, I saw scenarios where people laid like very good foundations for the problem. But then after understanding the problem, I struggle to understand the impact that they had, at the end. Or, they talk about the impact, but I don't really understand the scale. And all of those together, right, not coming together actually hurt your chances, right? So ultimately, I feel like your ability to perfect that story, right, is so crucial to your success in tech. And one of the things I've realized is that oftentimes it's not even how, the amount of projects you've done, right? It's how well can you articulate, your impact. And even sometimes being forthright. Like you said, I think that was a really good example. So not necessarily if you can talk about something in the past, can you use your creativity in the moment? And I think that's something that I would appreciate as an interviewer, right? Because one of the things, this big disservices that I see people do to themselves is when they try to make stuff up.
Yeah.
I think it shows very clearly and it looks really bad. Like you could literally go from like a plus candidate to like a C minus candidate when you have just one wrong answer because it then calls, what it does is like very psychological. It calls into question even all of the good work that you've done before, right? Because now it starts to make people question like, am I really, I thought that answer was great, but were they also kind of like faking it? So
Yeah.
I think like that's something that's really crucial. And I don't wonder if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I think you brought up a great point, and I agree. As soon as someone gets a hint that are they serious? Like, is this real? It kind of discredits what you've said before, or leaves a bad taste in somebody's mouth. I think one thing to think about when it comes to interview questions. So, like, if you've done your studying, you're looking at interview questions, you see there are certain themes that you can't, um, like, you don't have experiences with. I would say keep in mind that the hiring manager, the recruiter, specifically the hiring manager, they will want you to grow in that role. They want to see that you can do or more than what you've done, or at least get the notion that, hey, um, if we put this person in this role, they can grow, they can expand. And so instead of looking at if you don't have an experience that matches with a question as a downside, you could flip it as an upside to showcase kind of stretch your, as you mentioned, stretch your skills in terms of creative thinking, and then also get into the mindset of like, okay, if I'm in this job, how would I approach it? And use it, I guess, as a point for you than against you. Because uh, as I've seen in my role, I'm sure you've seen in your role. Usually, I think when you're in a role cross functionally, where you're like kind of at the heart, whether it be product or program, there's a lot of different things you're going to have to do that were not in that job description. And so, showing the hiring manager or the recruiter that you can go beyond what is your experience is always a plus.
Absolutely. And like typically I'm talking to people who don't have like who don't come from a traditional background, whether like educational wise or otherwise. But you have a computer science degree and digital media. How has that shaped, your journey in tech?
That's a great question. So I wish I had this romanticized answer as to like why I did computer science. Honestly, I just wanted a job. I was at Georgia Tech. I was a math major. Somebody literally called me out and they're like, "Do you want to like what do you want to do with your degree?" I think I said I want to be an actuary. They're like, well, "Do you even know what they do?" And I kind of did not. It sounded nice. They're like, "Do you want a job?" And I was like, "Yes." They're like, "You should probably look at CS." And at the time at Georgia Tech, math majors had to take the introductory CS courses. And I had done some HTML, CSS stuff in high school. I wasn't in love with it. I didn't think about it at night. It was just kind of like, I think I can do it. So I transferred over to CS. I knew I did not want to be an engineer. Like I had all my internships in engineering, but I was like, I don't think this is for me. I struggled. But I will say I do appreciate my CS degree. One, it did open up a lot of doors, also with the school that I went to. But I feel that with software development, you have to break down a problem to its smallest form and then build it back up. Um, and I appreciated the challenge of being able to do that. I remember when I started corporate, I was a project manager and I didn't like it. I was like, well, what did I like in college? And in my undergrad at Georgia Tech, they have like threads where one of my threads was focused on HCI. I was like, oh, I liked design. I liked the human aspect of thinking about software. So I thought, well, maybe I want to do UX UI. So I thought, let me go back and get my master's degree in that field or in that area. I enjoyed the degree program, but I knew I didn't want to be a designer. And so I appreciated the degree because it made me think about a different lens when it came to tech in terms of how do you build meaningful product or services within the tech world. And I feel like both of those degrees have shaped my experience for one, getting early experience, I guess, yeah, early experience in terms of breaking down complex problems And then I feel like my master's degree allowed me to think from a more, I say, humanistic or humanity like standpoint around what are the right questions that you should ask outside of, is it fast? Is it cool? Is it flashy? Like, how is this impacting people's lives? And even though, like, um, how can I say this? Uh, those questions do pop up in my day to day. I'm not the one answering them. I do appreciate, like I said, the way that it made me think and the way that it makes you think about software outside of, does it work? Because it could work, but it may not be meaningful or have the impact that you would want.
It's so powerful when you say that, because in one of my last roles, we were working with like a vendor company who said that they don't hire software engineers anymore. They said that they hire product engineers.
Mm,
That because they don't want people who can just code. And when I say I have this problem, they just tell me, oh, or they say, tell me what to do, and then they go do it.
yeah.
It's like I want people who are building, meaningful technology and technology that can grow at scale. And like they're not just stringing code together that may not necessarily work in the future because we have this other use case. So it's definitely interesting to see like, you bring that perspective as an engineer. So I think that's pretty cool. So, your journey from college up all the way to like your current role now, talk me through that, because the fact that you also come from like a traditional tech background, like, doing a CS doesn't mean like you've had the easy journey, have you?
Uh, no, but I will say it's been a privileged journey. And I would say I would say, uh, I think the hardest thing was me trying to find my fit. I think that, even, like, while I was in school, I think it was always clear that there are opportunities in tech. But I think what was missing at the time and what was missing throughout, like, as I was navigating my career is what is my fit? I like to say that, now that I see it now, tech is like salt. You can apply it to anything. You could be a gardener do and be in tech. Who knows with like what you're developing, the company. But um, I think it was definitely a struggle of me trying to find my fit, which is why I went back to school, which is one reason why I like did different jobs. Um, One of the, challenges that I had, especially in school, which I think I wanted to prove to myself, which is why I was like, I want this job at Google, is the lack of confidence I had in terms of, can I do this job? So yes, I was trained. Yes, I had the degree program, but in terms of like internships, I think I was great at interviewing. Like I can give you the knowledge all day, but when it comes to, like, sitting in front of a screen and then coming across an issue when it came to development, I would just, like, unravel. Um, and even in project management, I realize I love what you said around people don't want engineers anymore, they want product people. I also think they want like a big part of like success within tech, which I've learned, is it's not just about technical. It's definitely about like your human skills, how you interact with other people. And I felt that I was in environments where that was not the case. And given my personality, I felt like I just shrunk. Um, and so I feel that unknowingly, my roles throughout my career gave me confidence that I can do a little bit of a lot. And I felt like that has led me to where I'm at now, where I'm in the middle of a lot of things, a lot of different people I interact with, a lot of different tasks that I have. I'm not like the expert in any one thing, but I feel like there's a lot that I know about different pieces, and I can bring all of that together, learn how to bring all those people together to like shift them towards a goal. So I feel like kind of having those different roles, taking those years to build up my confidence to figure out what is my fit, um, I think aligned perfectly when the role came in terms of like being a TPM.
Hmm. I see one question from Crystal, but we're gonna take that when we get to the Q&A session later in the stream. But I do want to ask you one question. How did you get that first job? I hear that that's typically not. I hear like even my experience, like that's the hardest one, right? Because you've not successfully interviewed before. You don't even know what kind of like resume works. So there's a lot of tweaks that you have to make to get to that first one. What was that journey like for you?
And this is my first role like out of undergrad.
Yeah, yeah, first role.
Okay. Um, so so at Tech, uh, everyone that I knew who got their first job out of college got it out of like the easiest route was like an internship. And so for me, I had my mindset of like, I just need an internship as I'm entering my senior year, do well so they can give me an offer like when I graduate. Because um, the anxiety of like getting in front of a recruit, especially at the time, getting in front of a recruiter, giving my inner like my resume, doing an elevator pitch, like I just wanted to avoid all of that at all costs. And so while I was entering my senior year, there was this company, it was a small, like a startup company. I'd also never worked at a startup. I worked at big corporations. It was cool, but it didn't pan out like I wanted. And so in my mind, I thought, okay, if I could work at a small startup, I can like have my impact as like a intern. And then hopefully they like me and then transition me into like full time, which luckily is what happened. I think within like the college job portal, like the Georgia Tech internal job portal, I saw the job. The job was for project management. I knew I didn't want to be an engineer. It was like for cloud services. So they were a SaaS company. And I thought, well, SaaS is big. It's getting big. I mean, it is big, but at the time it wasn't as big as it is now. So I thought, okay, it's not really technical. It's for some technical company. I can get like project management experience. So I applied, I interviewed. Um, I guess the experience of having failure where you're in internships, they don't want you to come back the next year. They don't offer you a full-time position. I was very motivated like when I'm in this internship, like I just have to do well. Like it's not about if I like it or not. I was like I need a job. I have to get a job after I graduate college because my parents were not they're not going to be okay with that. So for me it was like I need to execute on the interview, execute on the internship. They really liked me, um, and they offered me a full time role upon graduation, which was great. And also, yeah, it was great. So that was my experience of like finding my first like full time role.
That is such a cool story. So, one of the things that I've just been able to glean from like your experience is that you like learning a lot, right? You did your bachelor's, you're like, you know what, I'm going back for one more. But beyond that, you also have like certifications in Safe Agile and AWS. Do you find that certifications are like, useful, or, what's your perspective on it? Because I know like the divide opinion these days. Before it was like just get a certification and then you're making six figures. Now, like it's like they're completely useless. Is there like a middle ground?
Ah, that's a great question. I feel like one of the reasons why I had gotten the certs is at the time I was thinking, I just want to check a box. And because I was exploring, like, what do I want to do within tech? I knew I did not want to leave tech. I was like, that's not an option. Because I felt like, I think I had a fear in terms of not understanding, like, how could I swim in these other industries? Um, I remember thinking like getting the cloud cert because cloud was everywhere. I'm definitely I don't know if the word is pragmatic, but I'm like I'll do whatever it takes to like check a box so that like it gives me more opportunities. So at the time that's what I wanted, and I wanted to the people that I admired most actually, when it came to podcasts, when it came to people that I like met and like in corporate, I felt like they knew a lot about a lot. Even though like reflecting on it now, they probably didn't know that much. But I liked that you could talk to them about different things and then they could bring up like an experience or something they knew. So I think also certifications, that was my way of doing that. Um and just saying like, oh, I can learn about cloud. I can be like certified in agile. In terms of your question around certs, my take on certs, I think it depends on the role. So I think in my current role as a TPM, uh, I think it depends on like the job and the role and what it's asking. I think for some things, certs can be looked at like a checkbox. Like it doesn't necessarily mean you know the material and you know how to apply it. It just means that you have like the textbook knowledge. And so I think that's the tricky space of like saying I have a certification, but I've also applied it or I know how to apply it within the role like that I'm like applying for. I feel specifically for TPM, I think certs can help, but I think depending on the role, uh, they may not make up for, I guess, like especially if it's a technical cert, it may not make up for like maybe what the job description is asking. But I always think, especially within the world of tech where things are new, things pop up, things are changing, it's always good to stay abreast on like where is, I don't want to say the industry as a whole is going, but where are the hot spots? Because I think another beautiful thing about tech is that it builds upon like different pieces. And so you may have a certain cloud, but that can be like applied to many different, I call them sub industries within tech. And also, terms of conversation, it's always, I think it's good to just know like, uh, not know what the hottest thing is within tech, but just have it in your tool belt that you can talk about certain topics.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that definitely is, it's kind of like close to my view as well, because ultimately, I think, just like you said, it can be more or less relevant, based on what, what role you're in.
Yeah.
But I still think overall that, it's something that's always better to have than not to have. Like you never want to come into a scenario where you need it and you don't have it versus like have it and not need it. And I think like, knowledge, especially like relevant knowledge for the sake of it is always good, regardless, right? Because it's easy to even, I've forgotten what that thing is called, where like, people overestimate what they don't know us and then underestimate what they do know, right? Like it's easy for you to like go very simply like a technical conversation, for example, and be able to use like your knowledge of like microservices and this and that and talk about it very seamlessly without even realizing that you've leveraged that knowledge, right? But it feels like now very relevant, but just because you know it, now it's done that. And that for me is like, I think the biggest value. Um,
I,
so, go ahead,
Sorry,
sorry.
I just wanted to add one point that while you were talking, it made me think about it. Um, so like I'm thinking about like product management or UX or UXR. Um, while you may not want to be a product manager, you may have like no desire to do UX or UI. There's a certain lens I think they have within tech around how you all approach solving a problem, what elements you bring into, okay, how do we know if this is a good solution or not? That a technical mind, not a technical mind, but a technical cert will not give you. And I think as we move into a world where design, I think design is critical. Again, I think it goes back to making meaningful products. I think it goes back to asking the right questions of, is this good for a user, whether it be consumer or enterprise? I think that certs can be a great way, even if you don't apply it, it's just a shift in your mindset in terms of different questions that you can ask, different ways that you can approach the problem. And so even if it's a certain like anthropology, not saying get a certain that, but I think also think about certs around possibly how does this change the way that I think about things? It may not be a tangible like I know how to do UX design. No, but maybe when you're in the room and the team is talking about a feature and should we develop this feature? Should we not? Especially if it's like a UX review or you're trying to figure out like how do we measure if this feature is successful? I think some people may be surprised how it's actually interesting to think about it from a product lens of why someone introduced this feature. Why do they think that this will bring success to the group, to the company? And so I think certs can be a way to, just, like I said, change the way that you view a problem, especially within tech when things are becoming much more dynamic around what makes a good solution, what makes a good product, like I said, whether enterprise or consumer, that I think certifications can help with.
I think you said that beautifully, and it's almost like now we're taking it from one another. And like the last thing I'll see on it that I really like is, for example, there's some like background certifications that I think almost anyone in tech should get. For example, something in cloud. I don't care if it's Azure, if it's GCP or AWS. Take your pick. And then some, and whether it's like some project management or agile certification, because it's so funny, people are doing like scrum master roles are kind of like, a thing of the past now, but everybody's doing like daily stand-ups and like running technology in like PIs and sprints and things like that. And if you're coming from a non-traditional tech background and all you do is just learn the code,
Yeah.
it's easy to underestimate how those things can throw you off, right? Like even going from role to role, for example, like the way we do, PI planning in my current role is very different from the way we do it. And coming into that process and taking my knowledge, as someone who's Scrum Master certified, I'm able to relate to a lot of the concepts, even though I've never done that before. And that just makes that transition a lot easier for me just because, I've taken that certification like 5 years ago, right? So I think even for those reasons where it's like, there's almost, if you think about it, it's almost like a language. Everybody just understands like the slang. And so if you go to like this city and like everybody's saying these things, but you don't know what it means,
Yeah.
it's not like you can succeed, but it's just that much harder, right? Because everybody almost has like the same, slang or language, and like you're just not from there, so you can't really relate.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think it's one of the things that pops up when the technical within technical program management. I feel like 70 to 80% is program management. The technical piece, depending on your domain, it's really to understand what's being said. Because there's nothing worse than being in a room. Somebody says something about why, like the feasibility of a solution. They could like mention client side. I was in a meeting today and someone was like, what's client side again? It's very easy to get lost in those conversations. And so understanding the jargon is like critical, as they say, table stakes, just to be able
Yep.
to navigate with these different teams. So I agree. It's slang, but it's a jargon, but it's good to understand it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the things I wanted to talk about again is, your, CX with Kris. What inspired that?
Great question. So I was just thinking about what do I know and what can I help people with? And I was like, well, what can I help people with specifically within the tech domain? I was like, I could definitely, I mean, I could try to help people with engineering, but wouldn't go far. Um, and so I think for the longest, I was avoiding helping people get into like TPGMing because I was like, or TPM, because I'm like, I'm not really like the GOAT or the LeBron or like the creme de la creme of like my role. Am I good at it? Yes. But for the longest, I thought like, I feel like I'm not the best. So like, is there anything I could like add when people like want to get into the role? I remember like, I think this whole year for me has been around like, how can I feel the fear and do it anyway? Like see the fear and do it anyway. So I thought, well, let me just post something on LinkedIn around like, I have my failures as like a TPM, but I've also had some wins. Like, if you have a question about like technical program management, like reach out to me. People did. I met with people. I gave them insight into like what my role was. A few people reached out to me in terms of interview prep, like they were interviewing for the role, and they needed tips on like what should they study. And so I remember giving them the tips. Long story short, they actually got the offer. Like they after the phone interview, they were like, "Hey, I passed the phone interview. I got this next round." Help them with the next round. It was like good. Also with the people that I spoke with, it felt good to know that after the meeting they got more insight into what the role was about. And so I thought, well, let me see if I could become not a coach, but like an advisor or a consultant around like, if you want to know about technical program management, I feel like it can be difficult to understand like what the job posting is saying. And based on your experience, like, can you do the job? And then also, the more I spoke with people, the technical part around like, how technical do I need to be? Which I realize if you don't work with TPMs or you're not a TPM, it can be hard to gauge around like what are they actually asking for in this like job posting, and should I get a cert for it or not? So I think after those conversations, I just decided to dive in. I'm I realized for the longest I was like jumping around on what I could do, and I'm like, well, I've had success within helping other people. I was like, let me just see how deeper I can go, and so that's how the idea came for CX with Kris.
Oh, that is so cool to see you helping all those people. And one of the things that I really care about is that, and I mean that's the only whole reason behind this. And And as you say that, like something came to my mind, right? Especially like as you use like the analogy of like the GOAT and LeBron. You know, one of the things that I think about is like how many people, especially in the community, gravitate towards sports and entertainment
Yeah.
because we have like this larger than life, personalities who basically just draw the attention. And I've always wondered like how do we create, those versions of people in tech? But maybe we don't. Maybe it's actually like, CXs with Kris and Joanne, the techie, who do it in like this small scale, hand to hand combat style
Mhm.
and just spread the message, so many people just doing it at once. So, really great job with that. So, one of the things that um, people tend to talk about a lot, in tech career journeys is networking and building a network and leveraging that. I think you've kind of like talked about it in reverse, right? People reaching out to you. But how has that worked in your favor in like, building a network or being able to leverage other people to grow your career as well?
Yeah. So it's been huge. As I think in this conversation I'm realizing how the many years that I was lost on like what should I do has helped lead me to the moment where I'm at right now where uh I feel good about what I do. So networking was a big thing for me in terms of understanding like what other people are doing within the tech industry in terms of like honestly also having just people to look up to, specifically like women within the industry who were doing well within their roles. And like I just needed a what is it? Uh I can't think of the not archetype, that's not right. But just someone that I could like feel like I could mimic in terms of like, oh, I want their successes. And then meeting with them, understanding like I think a big one for me was I found early in my career that I was working with people who were just like rude. I felt like I think in tech it's very easy to work within a team within a company that they make it feel like the world is about to end if something doesn't get launched. And then they put that pressure on everybody else. So a big part of my networking was finding leaders who did not have that energy. And especially if I were at a job where I was working with a product manager or even within my manager, or I saw another manager who didn't have that, like, kind of the world ends if this doesn't happen. Um, I took that as an opportunity to either make them my mentor or just learn from them. What does it mean to be a thoughtful person to work with? But even when I was applying for Google, leveraging my network within school around like what's it like to work at Google? Do you have any interview tips? And I think also networking provides you the confidence to reach out to people who you don't know in order to ask questions and get a better understanding around roles, companies. And so that has also been big. But it's really come into play as I've been trying to, like, as I was trying to find different roles. While I was trying to understand what's UXR versus UX, product management versus product marketing manager. So I really leveraged it just to understand like what can I do and how do I get there, assuming I wanted that role.
Mm, mm. So, one of the things that motivates a lot of us, I'll say, is money, right?
Yeah.
So, what does like the earning potential look like, for someone in your role when you're starting out, kind of like when they're mid career, and when they kind of like start making it to senior?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm not sure about early career in terms of like what that earning potential looks like. But I do know that as you like within a like mid-career technical program management, it's so much more than just project execution. And so I bring that up to say there's so many skills that you learn in terms of organizing a large group of people, executing on a strategy, aligning people like uh, I guess, within a strategy. And so I know that like as you become more senior and as you focus less on project execution and focus more on like program strategy around cross-functional teams, and get more into director, senior director, the earning potential is like very high. And then also I think as a TPM, because I think you learn so many transferable skills, and then depending on your domain, you get more technical knowledge in terms of not necessarily being in the weeds, but just understanding, okay, how do I build products within cybersecurity, within consumer mobile applications. And so the skill sets, as I guess, learning that within itself can also be transferred to like other different opportunities that go beyond program management. So I think whether you decide to stay within program management or because I feel like you're really an organizer, which is one of the most important things. You know how to organize people around a goal. You know how to add structure given like very little information. It can be transferred to so many different areas. You have like UX, TPGMs, software TPGMs. So I think the world is your oyster like once you enter within that realm, or the tech industry is your oyster. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so we've come to like the Q&A. Thanks everyone for sticking with us. Like, share, follow, subscribe wherever you're watching. And if you have any questions, leave it in the chat. We'll start taking them now. I think Krista got has in first, so we're going to start with that one. So, she asked a very simple question. What makes a good program manager?
That's a great question. So I think a good program manager is someone who knows what needs to be, I'm going to say this, knows what needs to be done in order to let other people on your team shine. So I feel that at the heart of program management, it's understanding like engineering, product, whoever, UX, whoever's working with you on this program, what they need in order to do their job and what they need removed in order for them to continue on their job, or what they need added. So I always think about processes, workflows, like especially within a dynamic field like tech where there's so many different pieces involved. I think understanding the different people that you're working with, what their needs are, and then as a program manager, providing that structure, that organization, allowing all these different people to move forward towards their goal. I think organization is also makes a really good program manager. So um, usually within program management, you could be given a program that's already taken flight. And sometimes that program could not be in the best state. And so part of your role is to come in and add structure around meetings, structure around how does the team gather requirements, structure around the launch process. Basically, this program, which is a system of different people who are going in different directions. Sometimes those directions may not align. That alignment may not be there across different stakeholders. And so as a program manager, like you're there to kind of add that order. I think re- similar to adding order, communication is key. So it's a big part of your job to communicate the status of a program and also evangelize and socialize the impact that your program has, so that other people can see the good work that your team is doing. And then also you get more investment, more, and when I say investment, it could be like dollar amount or it just could be interest in what your program is doing. And so I think that's very critical. Yeah.
So essentially, it's helping other people shine and just being a good team player and enabling everyone to achieve their goals. If I
Yes.
could summarize
Yeah.
it.
And last thing, I think it's being very agile or dynamic, understanding things are going to constantly change. Road, like what is it? Surprises come every week. And so being able to like take the impact of whatever those surprises are and still keep your team moving forward. I think that's a big thing. You have your eyes in so many different things. So while other people are in the weeds doing their role, you're kind of like more high level, seeing how like kind of watching the waters to see how things are going. And if you see something pop up or you're proactive to see that, okay, something's about to come, you can navigate your team in the right direction so that there's very little impact to whatever may pop up. Could be a requirements change, could be a prioritization change, could be resource change. It doesn't matter. You do your best to try to keep them moving forward, given the different surprises or changes that can happen with a program, especially with software.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we have another question is like, how do you address competing priorities or conflicting resource needs?
Oh, I feel like that's a great question. So when it comes to competing priorities or like uh, resourcing needs, like we need a resource, they need another team needs the same resource. I think at the end of the day, it's getting people in the same room. So who are the decision makers? Usually that's like across product, across eng, sometimes across UX, and seeing what are the trade offs. So if you get this resource, that means it has impact to our program, our project, and are people okay with that? I think somebody brought up a good point that as a program manager, engineers may care about how, like how something is done. Product cares about what is being done. Program management, I really don't care how. I kind of do. I care about what, but it's not my priority. I just care about getting it done. And so, with that, I think with conflicting priorities, resources, it's really around getting who, I'm not going to say who owns the resource, but who's the manager of the resource, whose product does this impact? Usually that means there's a product manager involved, and kind of between engineering teams, what is the trade off? Uh, and then having an alignment conversation around, I guess, if something does have to fall to the wayside, what is that thing? And are they okay with it? If it means that it takes something longer to get done, what would be that new timeline? And then I think most important, communicating that to the right people so everybody's aligned on like what couldn't be done in order for something to get done. So if it means a resource stayed on a program or stayed on a project, communicating out the impact that it has on other projects or programs. But I think alignment, understanding trade-offs, communicating those trade-offs to the people that need to know. Because at the end of the day, I feel like everybody knows a decision has to be made, and then we have to move forward.
Mm. That is so helpful and powerful. While waiting for the next question, I have another one of my own. So, as someone who's worked in both, development and the other side of it, what advice would you give anyone who's considering, switching one way or the other?
Um, that's a great question. Like if they want to go from engineering to like a more non-technical role or vice versa, like program to engineering.
Yeah.
Um, I think my advice to them would be understanding what you're about to learn in this new chapter. And if you can, understanding is like that the path that you want to move forward with. So, for example, if you're engineering and you want to get into more program management, um, it's definitely a people focused role. Like there is no hiding in the corner. There is no not saying anything. I feel like, especially with almost all companies I've been with, engineers are kind of protected. Like, don't put them in extra meetings. Don't take them off of like handling the tasks that they have. I feel like non-technical roles, especially program management, something very different. You are within everything, and of course, that means prioritizing what you focus on. But I would say, look at the trade-offs, what you would learn in each role, and I think also understanding. I think you can always navigate back, and maybe a longer journey navigating. Like, let's say you've done program management, you've never like touched a keyboard in your life in terms of like programming. Um, you decide to be an engineer. It'd probably be easier to go back to program management than um, uh, what was it? Engineer? No, no, no. Program management engineer. Actually, never mind. I take back what I said. I think my advice would be understand what you would learn given whatever new role you want to go in. If that aligns with like your long-term goals, especially if you want to get more into management, and within that, you don't need to know a lot of technical skills, um, and just craft a plan. But also, I think there's always a path moving forward. So if it doesn't work out, there's always something else available, or you could go back.
That's great. And then we have one other question. So how do you deal with feeling of owning the process, but not always the owning the outcome?
Uh, that's a great question as well. So how do I feel about owning the process but not owning the outcome? Um, I feel like anytime you introduce a new process, you could go in with the best intentions of like, this is going to speed up our launch process. And then something like it could be great the first month. And then month two, somebody comes up and they're like, this is not working for us anymore. Or you find out that it actually creates more bottleneck when it comes to like approvals of the process. I think for me, it's about iteration and testing it out, seeing how it works. And I think creating a culture, or I guess a working relationship with me where if something isn't working out, letting me know. But I think in terms of owning the process but not the outcome, I think it's being able to like cut ties with it if it's not working out. At the end of the day, I'm doing my best to like make things more efficient, but I feel like I can't be tied down to anything. And so if it's not working out, cutting cords and seeing, okay, what else should we do? Um, or if it is working, great. But I find if it's not working, it's not the end of the world. I think most important is that you introduced it. I probably got more input around what's working and what's not working, and then going back to the drawing board. Um, I think there's never ever, I don't think there's ever a perfect process, but I think there's good ones that can become really good, or good ones that it's like, okay, this is good and it keeps us moving forward.
Mm, that's really great. So we have another question. Says if the PGM is unable to influence the team to get what needs to get done, how do you know when you've exhausted all your options prior to involving, leadership?
Okay. If a TPM is unable to influence their team to get what needs to be done, how do you know when you've exhausted all your options prior to involving senior leadership? Uh, how do I know I've exhausted all my options? Um, I think for me, I've exhausted all options if I've um, so usually I'm dealing with like tech leads, or it's like the engineers that report to them. Um, I think that's a great question.
And
Uh,
I think that, oh, sorry, go ahead. So
go
I
ahead, go
see you're
ahead, go
still
ahead.
working. One of the things that I wanted to kind of like, I don't know if it's extra difficulty, but it's almost like, in your role, whether it's in product or program, the thing that gets you things is like playing nice, right? Like you don't definitely want to go out and ruffle feathers or like put people on blast or, kind of like shine the spotlight on anyone. So it's definitely like a very, tricky dance. But you
Yeah,
still must get your priorities done, right?
yeah, I think I have, and that's a great point. I think at the end of the day, some battles aren't just worth fighting for. I think for the most part, everybody wants the same goals. How do we drive projects forward? How do we do it in a way that is most efficient? Uh, I find most of the time the battles are lost or won when it comes to like approvals. Like, how many approvals do we need before it's deemed okay to start working on or okay to start launching? Um, to me, I think some things people are, well, mostly everyone will get on board with, and some things, like I said, people won't. And uh, I That's a great question, but sometimes I think you just have to let it go. If like you want to make an improvement and it's not being, um, I guess, embraced by the rest of the team. And I definitely agree with you that it's very rare you can like flip over the table and say, let's start anew. No, it's usually an iterative, like piece by piece. Have you documented like what's working, what's not working, and then can you use that as evidence to like maybe go to the next step within like an iterative like process improvement. Um, but no, that's a great question. I don't know if that was a great answer, but thank you, Juwan.
No, no,
That
no, no, no. I think it is. So I think we're coming up to the end, unless we have any further questions. But typically, like this is the spot where you can give any like final thoughts that you have, promote anything, whether you got a new movie coming out to the box office or
no, that's great. Uh, I guess my last thoughts. I would say, so I love that your podcast is like helping people understand the different options that exist for them within the tech industry. Um, I love also what you said around like sometimes it's not the huge figures like the LeBrons. It could be like the neighborhood businessman or businesswoman that provides you the confidence of like, oh, I can actually do this. Um, I would say the tech industry is so large. I like to think of it as a continent. So it's a continent with many different countries involved with it, like involved in it. And these different countries are like domains, whether it be SaaS, financial services, and then even within those countries, there's like different opportunities. And so I bring that up to say, like, um, there's so many ways that you can find your fit within the industry. Um, and I think having podcasts like this, reaching out to anyone that you think may be in the role that you want, or even looking at job postings to identify, like, I think I want to do this role and working backwards. Because you may find it's not the role, it's more the responsibilities. And those responsibilities are within different roles. I think also, which I know you've talked about, is that many successful jobs within the industry do not mean you need to have a deep technical knowledge. I think there's definitely a wave of change where uh, technical understanding can be table stakes sometimes, but I think it's also like the other pieces that are involved with making great software, which is more psychological, uh, which is more thinking about things outside of the technical lens, and building your skill set and expertise in that. And if anybody's watching and they are interested in technical program management, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. Um, uh, yeah, and help as I can. But that's my what's going on with me. And I guess I don't even know if that's what's going on with me versus like party words.
Yeah. And what's the best way to connect with you?
Uh, Probably on LinkedIn. Yeah, just sending me a DM or a connection request on LinkedIn. Um, I am one of those people that doesn't have notifications on for LinkedIn, but I do check it every day. So I I try to I will get back with you. But yes.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kris. This has been absolutely amazing. I loved, the fact that you shared what almost feels like a brand new perspective, kind of like going from engineering to UX, and now even being a program manager and tying all of that together. And I really like, the fact that you're a continuous learner. You're always learning new things. And I think one of the things that you said that really stuck with me was this idea of doing whatever is necessary. I think that that's the spirit that more people need to have, because I think tech is always changing, tech is always evolving, and I think the people who are willing to change along with it will always find success.
Mhm.
So thank you so much for sharing your journey. Thank you so much for being an inspiration, and thank you for the work that you're doing with CX with Kris, and also giving people free game on this podcast and telling them to connect if they have any questions or need some guidance.
I appreciate your kind words, Joanne, and your very thoughtful questions, and for having me on. Love the work that you're doing and providing this platform to hopefully, help other people to see like what opportunities are out there, and then hopefully, even if it's not with like what I said, providing others like inspiration that like there is always a path moving forward, especially within this industry. So I appreciate your time and the opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, that's the show for tonight. We got another one on Thursday. It's Working in Tech live stream. We're always bringing, a lot of amazing people sharing their amazing experience. And I hope to see you again on Thursday, but not before we say one more thank you, Kris from LinkedIn.